Hello, everyone. Welcome to another special Trek Log episode of Flashback 64. And you know who's here. It's me, Gooey, and McKenna.
Hello.
And our special Trek Log shipmate, Adriel.
Have I graduated to being an ensign
ambassador
or
something?
Yeah, you've passed you've gone through Starfleet Academy.
Oh my god.
You're good.
Wow, we should have like a ceremony if that's the case. I thought that I was still like an intern or a janitor or something. So that's pretty cool to hear that I've passed.
Yeah, we should make you take like a test or something.
Oh my god.
Actually,
I'm ready.
I have a question for you. I was going to ask at the end of the episode, but can I maybe I'll just ask you now. Because I was curious about it, because I was looking ahead. But anyway, question is, do you know what the Prime Directive is? It's okay if you don't, because I realized, I was like, we haven't watched any episode having to do with that.
The Prime Directive. I feel like I've heard of it. I know what it... Okay. I know that it is a thing, and I could like maybe take a guess at it, but I'm sure it would be wrong.
It's... Okay.
Yeah,
we'll talk about it in the future, because it's like their general order number one. They call it. It's like their
guiding principle.
But yet we haven't. I kind of find episodes about them are hit or miss. Like it's not the most. It's an interesting topic, but it's not my most interesting thing in Star Trek. What do you think, McKenna?
Yeah, it's there. It's
the reason I thought of it is it's not that important in a future episode, but someone brings it up, like the concept of it as like an important little part, and I was like, oh, maybe we should. I keep thinking of things to insert, but I'm like, maybe we'll do an episode, and there's good TOS ones, but I was thinking maybe we'll just do like a set of TNG episodes to see.
Yeah. It feels most important in TNG.
Yeah.
I guess maybe they...
Well, there's like TOS episodes where they're like, oh, there's a Nazi planet. What do we do? Do we interfere? You know. So there's some, but yeah, TNG has some not great episodes about it, but then they have some really good episodes about it. So we'll do that down the road. I wanted to set us up to talk more about like Romulans and things like that, but I thought maybe we'll hit upon the Prime Directive in the future, but we'll save that for now. We'll get into the episode, because today we are talking about, we're going on a Spock trek. I meant for this to be kind of Spock focused, but it's a little bit of mixed stuff, and then we watched one episode and we're like, this isn't going to be really fun to talk about, so let's put this one in instead. So it's kind of based around Spock and Romulans, but it's also just kind of based around like having some good episodes in there too. And I think all of these are pretty great episodes we talked about, right? I don't think there was any stinkers.
Yeah.
I'll say I loved all of them. I loved all of them, and I spoilers, I cried in all of them also. So I don't know if that says about me, but these ones really spoke to me. Not to say that I didn't shed a few tears in some of the previous ones that we watched, but maybe I'm just a Spock guy. I don't know.
I'm excited to find out what moments there were. You have some ideas, maybe?
I remember
of just like
when you could cry. Did you cry? I definitely cried a few times.
I
still
thought I did think of one moment.
Yeah.
That was a little emotional for me.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. Well, we'll get into that. And one thing that's kind of fun is this is sort of like a prequel to what kind of kicked it all off with our Movies That Whip episode. Because you kind of saw an important step in Spock's kind of development as a character. Not the end of it, actually, but... So I don't know, how was it just kind of going back and now seeing like this is what we're seeing of like in this is kind I feel like the pop culture, like the way Spock is remembered, like this presentation on TOS. And there's other episodes that show off like the different ways he's remembered and portrayed, but I think you kind of got like you kind of get a good idea of it here, like the dynamic with him and Kirk and McCoy. That's kind of like and you see that in the movie, but obviously it's a little different. They were a bit more strained. So here you kind of saw them at like the way people think of them, kind of the way they tried to sort of recapture them in the new movies, you know? So, I don't know if you got any different vibes from that, but
I mean, Spock is my favorite character, like point blank favorite character. I mean, I like a lot of different characters, but Spock really is special, and I feel like I understand. I mean, I've only barely scratched the surface on Spock, but he's such a consistent character, but yet a really surprising character. I think that because the hyper logic, but also the like emotional kind of like boundaries that he's rubbing up against, like feel like really fertile ground for the writers to be able to like play with things that are like surprising. There's that like old adage in writing where it's like endings should be both surprising and inevitable. And so they should feel like you're kind of careening towards something that had to happen but is still engaging and exciting and surprising. And I feel like that all the time with Spock, and that's why I feel like he's one of my favorite characters. And he's just really well written, and Leonard Nimoy's just such a good actor. It's just really wonderful. Perfect. Really wonderful stuff. So seeing the background of him feels unlike Worf, for example, who like has such a difficult, like fraught backstory that like really illuminates who he is as a character. It feels like Spock's like serve to deepen his character arc, but they don't ever like really feel like there was an aha kind of moment with him, you know? It just feels like, oh, that's like, it's all very consistent and all very just like, it feels like you're getting to know someone in real life, right? Like there's these like subtle things that you learn about them and you're like, oh, that's why you are the way you are, you know?
Right.
So,
yeah.
Anyway,
I think some of the plots here will definitely illuminate that to different degrees. We like Spock over here, right?
Yeah. Spock's cool.
He's kind of a blueprint for a lot of different characters, like sort of like Data, or you mentioned Worf. Like they do a lot of characters that are like between two cultures, you know. And obviously he's just like not just the blueprint for other characters, but now there's been like 3 interpretations of Spock. You know, they had the movies, and then now with sort of like the prequel stuff they're doing now, he's kind of an enduring. He's the most interesting character, I think, especially in TOS, which this is our first time talking about TOS, which is fun. I really enjoy the sort of overall vibe and like the storytelling of the original series. You haven't seen like every episode of the original series, but
no, I think I had seen
most of these, I would assume.
Oh, yeah.
I'm pretty sure we've watched all these episodes together.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, it's some people I talk to, like, who maybe got into later Trek stuff, they don't like the pacing so much, I think. But I think it's just more the format. It's a little bit longer, so there are like less commercials in the hour.
Yeah,
so
I mean, and they're antiquated,
longer,
right? They like have that 1960s sensibility about them. I mean, they really do feel like of the time in the way that they're written. They're much more like hyper. They're like theater more, you know, than like.
Especially when you get into the fights and well, even the 90s Trek is like that, but it's more over exaggerated here, I think.
Yeah, I mean, this is very much like double feature with like the original like Twilight Zone, you know, like it feels like.
Well, and they shared a lot of DNA actors, and I'm sure sometimes sets and costumes might even have been shared. So.
I just assumed that because of the vibe overall, you know, and them being these like kind of like not anthology series, but I guess Twilight Zone is an anthology series, but
Star Trek.
No, I mean I can see them being
too.
kind of. Yeah, exactly. Like there's some that are like there's arcs, but it is like, yeah, I can see like when I first was getting to know you and like a couple of other people I know who are Star Trek people, I was like, okay, I should just start at the beginning. That's what I should do. Mm-hmm. So I started at like episode 1 of the original series, and I found it like difficult to get into. And I think it was because it was like, it is a bit antiquated, and because it feels like, all right, I have to like get through, like quote unquote, get through this series before I can get to the ones that feel more modern or more interesting or whatever. So I really feel like it's been advantageous in many ways for me to have like bespoke Star Trek playlists that you make for me, but that I've like returned now to the original series with so much a much greater and deeper understanding and of like the world and the conventions of this world and the people who are in it and the kinds of stories that they're telling. It makes me really appreciate the original series so much more. So yeah, I had a really good time with this.
I think they have some of the best stories at times on here, and some like I love the production design of everything. And I think it's one of those things. It's especially if you start off like a lot of collections have it with like there's like a rejected pilot, and like the episode, the orders don't really matter. So I find it's sometimes good to like, a lot of times people experienced it in just like syndication, so they just watch any old episode, and so I think it's kind of best to, go into stuff that seems more interesting, and then it, like I think once you can get an appreciation for it, I think it's one of the best Star Trek series. I mean, it's certainly one of the most iconic ones, obviously. So yeah, but yeah, I don't know. Maybe we can talk about the first episode that we have here, because I think it is a great example of this, of just being a mini movie, and there's a reason for that. So let's get into it.
Captain's log, stardate 1710.0. The Starship Enterprise is under heavy attack by an enemy vessel.
Obviously, their weaponry is superior to ours, and they have a practical invisibility screen.
Helm, hard over. Phasers, fire, point blank.
I'm pointing out that we could have Romulan spies aboard this ship.
The Earth Commander will follow. He must. And when he attacks, we will destroy him.
Permit me the glory of the kill, Commander.
Townsend. We have him. Move toward him.
We can get just one phaser going.
Phasers, Mr. Spock.
Impossible, Captain.
We have some of the old-style nuclear warheads aboard.
Yes, Commander, but only for self-destruction.
Place one in with the debris.
Balance of Terror, which we talked about. Some of the season episode numbers are a bit off depending on where you watch, but this is billed as far as I can tell, season 1, episode 8 of the original series, which first released December 15th, 1966, and it was written by Paul Scheider, who wrote a couple TOS episodes and some animated series, and it was directed by Vincent McKevity.
Like in Cats.
There you go. Yeah. He directed 6 episodes of the original series, and the synopsis from Memory Alpha is: the Enterprise battles a Romulan ship suspected of destroying outposts near the neutral zone, which was something that we talked about a little bit before. This is really introduced kind of the concept of that. But also, fun fact, this movie is based on, or this script was based on the Robert Meacham submarine film, The Enemy Below, and possibly this other film that was adapted from a book called I think they're both adapted from a book called Run Silent, Run Deep. But
that is an amazing title. Wow, holy shit, that's a great title.
They both have elements from this, but if you watch The Enemy Below, they really get a lot of the beats from it in this episode. And I don't think they were too, like, I think even the director of the episode, like, when asked about it later, and he saw, like, someone showed in the movie or something, I can't remember the exact quote, but he was like, yeah, that it's basically the same story. So, but
I mean, it's a beautiful story. It's a beautiful story. I think it's so simple, but it's so. It really got me. This one, well, they all really got me.
This one really
I'll
got
say,
you.
but this one really got me. And I think a lot of it was just that there's like several really powerful actors, and that helps to make it really make it effective. And it's like antiquated in some ways, but like you could modernize this and make it more or less complicated, and you could add nuances to this. But I think that it's a simple story and a really simple execution with good acting and good writing, and yeah, I loved this one.
Yeah, what did you think, McKenna?
I thought it did a really good job of making a battle between two ships that are really not very close to each other. Nobody's ever they're rarely, face to face. It still feels very intimate.
Yes, intense, and
there's a lot of close up shots, especially particularly of Kirk and of the Romulan.
Yes, the Romulan. He doesn't have a name in this. The commander.
They
give him
capital.
They give him the Dracula eyes, where they shine the light across their eyes.
And a lot of this just happens because of the way that it's shot, that actors have to be close together for this. But I feel like I noticed it more in this episode, where it would just be like several characters, all close together, just like discuss it. There's a lot of discussion between the action.
Yes, yeah. Like every like close up shot, like once it really kicks off, like they get to like there being the conflict between the two, like every moment, every shot in the show it's like dripping with such aura, like there's such an intensity that all the characters are bringing, and the way they're lit, and the way it looks, and like they've got it a little bit darker than you normally see on TOS, but it's still like got that stark color, and everything. It's just from a vibe perspective, it's like one of the best episodes in that regard.
Yeah, pure vibes. I mean, I liked seeing a different ship. I liked that it felt like it was, this one also felt sort of theatrical, in that it was like, it almost reminded me of Alien a little bit, that it was like, it's like this very tight, like it's like, a lot of Star Trek is just on the Enterprise or whatever, but like this one, that it just toggled between this ship and then like one room on this other ship was very cool. It was very cool, and it made the whole thing, as you said, McKenna, feel really intimate, which was the point of the whole thing. They end up feeling very intimate with each other, not in a creepy way. In an emotional way,
Yeah. Oh, of course. Yeah. I like you mentioned the battle. Like I feel like, it's a thing with Star Trek. Like the battles, I think when they do, not most episodes aren't really like that, but they usually have to insert some type of exciting. Sometimes episodes will have like a B plot that's really not what the episode's about. I'm sure, like, if you pick out many episodes we talked about in TNG, it's like the real thing you remember from the episode is like whatever, Riker talking to his dad or something, but there was probably some subplot where like a planet's gonna blow up or some, like
Yeah. Yeah.
But when they do episodes that really focus on that, they do it really well. And I think, I mean, obviously it's like a lot, the guys writing this are, who did this stuff, like Roddenberry, he was in World War II, so we're like, these are people who are kind of like often reflecting on their own experiences, and I think it, like, I always think the battles, the way to portray them, it might be boring to some people, but I think thinking of them of like a naval submarine battle where you have to like calculate your moves and stuff like that, as opposed to like constant laser like, I think that's the way to do it, and to actually have drama and tension and downtime and like these moments where it breathes, and I think making it submarine versus ship was really smart. And this is the Romulans, like the first time the Romulans ever appeared in Star Trek, but it's also the first time a cloaking device ever appeared in Star Trek. And I think that was a really clever invention, because it gives you that feeling of submerging, but like, how do you do that in space? And so I think, I don't know, maybe it's really obvious, but I think it's cool. What do you think about the pacing, the battles? We've watched some of the newer shows. I think in Strange New Worlds, they found a good pacing for it, where it wasn't quite as crazy as like the J.J. Abrams movies, but it's like they give it still the feeling of like they're floating through air or like the space, and it's a bit more. It's like a middle ground,
Yeah, I think it's an episode of Discovery where there's like a battle going on, and it just shows outside, and there's like a million lasers going on, and I think I laughed because I was like, "What is happening?" Whereas here, it's like there's so much like discussion going on in between each move. It makes it a lot scarier.
Yes.
It's like, what's going to happen next? We really have to think about this next move. And then it happens, and you really feel like the impact of each decision.
They discuss what they're going to do, and you kind of you understand like what they're trying to accomplish, even though it's all made up sci-fi jargon. Like,
right,
it's believable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, and it's also just though you kind of don't want. At least I felt, I was like, well, you don't want what you want them to just not be engaging in this fight at all. It's so different from. I mean, it's interesting to talk about like how like Roddenberry and some of these other writers were in World War II, especially because that was like. Of all of the wars, right? That was the one that like sort of lives in our memory as being like there was a good side and a bad side, whereas like something like this, and that's never the way it is in war, right? But it particularly the way that one is written is like that is a clear black and white kind of thing, whereas this story is like you just really want them to like disengage and not. I didn't want any violence to happen. I just wanted them to both just go their separate ways, and to see them like the process of them like digging in and like logicking them, both of them logicking themselves into being like, oh shit, like now we're in this like stalemate where like we like somebody has to die was like really tough, because they were both making the same moves, and like they could then start to like see what the other one was thinking. And I mean, that's what the spoiler is. That's what I was like, at the end when the Romulans are they realize like this is it, that they've like lost, and he's like talking to Kirk, and he's like, you and I are the same, like we like in another time, like I could have called you my friend. It's like, oh, it's so sad. Yes. Or not sad, it's just like it's just true. It's tragic. It's like moving, and it's tragic, and it's also like, but it's somehow like obviously it's like cheesy, but it didn't ring as cheesy to me at the time. I was like, wow, like, because it's true. He's like, instead of, it's so Star Trek, right? Instead of being like, like, you and I, like, like, good game, brother, and then that's it. He's like, you and I could have been friends if, like, we were the same. And it's just really, it was really powerful to me.
Yeah, that's something actually from the movie it's based on. I don't want to go on about that, but I recommend people check it out, because it's like people dealing with, it's 1957, I think it came out, and there's sort of people at the time are reckoning with, like, Nazism and stuff like that, and they actually do a similar thing in that movie but they have it where the German submarine captain is like, he's like sick of the war and everything, and like Robert Meacham's and their crew is sort of dealing with, like, how could this happen, and they have sort of this theme going through of like, well, there's this darkness is inside of a lot of, like, humanity.
Interesting.
And yeah, so there's maybe some things that would be handled a different way now, but I think it overall, if you look at it, has like kind of an interesting idea behind it. And yeah, at the end, like, they get him on their boat and he gives him a cigarette. It's really weird, but
interesting, because that's not how this ends.
Yeah. We should talk about the you mentioned the actors, and we were talking about the Romulans, so maybe we can talk about some of the Romulans here, because they of course set kind of the tone for what they're like in the rest of, like, the universe here. And, well, one, you mentioned, like, they kind of have this war weariness, and I think they get a lot out of, like, you don't really learn a ton about Romulans, but since they kind of are taking on this sort of, like, Roman sort of vibe, it gives it the same, well, this is ahead of time, but it makes me think a little bit of, like, Gladiator, and Russell Crowe's, like, you just get this idea of, like, right, they're kind of, like, out there dominating and waging war and stuff, and so it doesn't take much to believe that, like, their commander would be tired of it, but the Romulan commander here is played by Mark Leonard. So that's our first guy setting the tone for the Romulans, who also played Sarek. He plays Spock's dad.
I loved that, which we will talk about later, but I was like, I know that guy.
And you've also seen him. He is the first person we ever see as a Klingon with, like, the full Klingon head.
Whoa,
going
really?
on, because he's the Klingon. He plays the Klingon captain in the opening of the motion picture, who gets killed by V'ger. Yeah, so little role, man. But cool.
A memorable role.
Yes, and so he's there, and he's got these scenes with this other actor, John Warburton, who plays the Centurion. They're both kind of like these classic traditional actors. Like, if you look them up, they're in a bunch of classic stuff that you might not know. I haven't even seen a lot of their films, but I think they really bring a lot to this episode. Like, it's again taken from that movie. They have these two characters who talk like that, and they almost have their own. It's almost like their own version of Kirk and Bones, like sort of like they have these heart to hearts together, and yeah, they really set the table, sort of like. Well, you get the idea that they're actually kind of out of the ordinary a little bit from how they've encountered the Romulans, but they've kind of interesting. Starfleet has sort of an interesting, like, they have not had real contact with them, like, because the last time they fought them, it was no ship-to-ship communications. They're fighting with, like, nukes or warheads or something, like really primitive. So, yeah, they sort of have a mystique. So I guess we don't really know what a lot of them are like, but it was interesting to show them first like this, I would say.
I thought that where he was like we've hated them forever, and then there was a line where he's like, only the Romulans know what they think of humans. And I thought that was like such a great, I mean, I don't know if that's the exact line, I'm paraphrasing, but it's like, instead of saying like they are monsters and like whatever they like they're barbarians, which is essentially what they're saying. But like they again, it's such a Star Trek thing to do, but they're like, who's to say what they think of us? You know, we don't know because we have no idea who they are or what they're doing, which is like such a great way to immediately like set the expectation of like they have some complicated feelings about what we are doing to them as well. It's very cool.
And I would say, well, that kind of paints a lot of how their episodes go in TNG as well. So that's something you'll see eventually is that, like, especially then, that's when it's like the theme becomes less about World War II and more about the Cold War. So there's a lot of like mistrust, between the two sides and stuff like that. So just something to look out for in the future. We also had, I wanted to briefly mention Lawrence Montagny, who played Decius. He was like the one who was like, let me go in for the kill. He actually played Stan in Amok Time, who was like T'Pring's like dude she wanted to marry. Yeah. So we see
I didn't recognize him, but yeah.
The Romulans can play the Vulcans, and that's kind of like the thing they hang. That's unique, I think, more so to this episode is you have this on the Starfleet side. You have this character Styles, I believe was his name, who is like distrustful once they discover like maybe they share like a bloodline with the Vulcans or something. Like he's like distrustful of Spock, and they're sort of this like bigotry element in there, which I thought was
he says it. He's like, there will be no bigotry, like leave your bigotry in your dorm room or whatever. He says something like that,
and Spock like saves his ass, pulls him out of the engineering or whatever.
Yeah, I think one thing with that is that maybe like from a more modern Trek fan perspective, looking back, you have to kind of remember that Spock is like the only Vulcan.
Yeah.
That
like
most of them know. They're
own...
not familiar, so when he sees like, oh, they look alike. They don't really have that background knowledge of the Vulcans.
That's something I think is nice in Star Trek, is that it's like this kind of utopian vision, but like it like despite the idea of like everyone gets along, and I mean Styles is kind of a, he's not like one of your regular crewmates, but I like the idea of like we can still explore these things of like humanity doesn't just reach perfection, you know what I mean? So it's a good there's plenty of stories like that throughout Star Trek, and I think they hit hard in this case. We also had there was this sort of book ending with Angela was the one character's name, and Tomlinson was her fiance. They start
okay, now this was weird. This subplot I chose to forget. I just was like, what is this? This is not necessary. No, that could be dismissed. That whole thing, I was like, what the hell is going on with this? Like, it's so strange. And like, perhaps it was an acting issue. I don't know. But like, I was like, she's the werewolf. She's the one who's like on the ship who's gonna like tank. I did not trust her. I thought something bad was going on with her. And then she turned out to be fine. So I don't know. I did not like what was going on between that strange couple that was maybe getting married and then not getting married and then he died. I don't know. You can change my mind, but
what did you think, Kenna?
I do think it gives like a consequence on their side, where without it they would go unscathed. Yeah. Whereas that they have that moment and it's like, okay, someone has been permanently affected by this encounter.
Yeah. It does give it, because a lot of Star Trek episodes end with you've got Kirk sitting there, Bones and Spock
trio,
and they're just like
goofing.
Well, Spock, it's
Spock raises his eyebrow.
Yeah, Spock, your human side came in handy this time. That is quite unfortunate, Doctor. Oh, and I like
Bones being like, I have the last word for once.
Yeah. So I like that this ends. It's kind of hard. Like, it ends with Kirk just like walking down the hallway, and it's like kind of sad,
Yeah, I mean, I will say that I think that it, dare I say, I think it cheapens the emotional weight of the encounter with the Romulans, and this like moment where they're like, oh my God, like I don't know if this was the right thing that we did. Like, this was a really complicated wartime encounter that like we should, like, I don't think they would feel good about it even if they came out completely unscathed. You know what I mean? So I don't know that like losing a crew member was entirely necessary. Like, perhaps it precipitated the like more violence, but I don't know. I just was like, they're gonna feel messed up after this encounter regardless. Like,
okay.
I mean, I didn't like hate it, but I did think like the Romulans and that whole thing just like stole the show so much. So
yeah. I wouldn't even call this like a subplot necessarily. It was just like a bookend, I guess,
Yeah.
I think because it is like, bookends, it does feel a little bit just like added in. You don't know these characters.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm thinking of like DS9 episodes where like there's a lot of death, and there's it's all a lot of faceless deaths, and I'm thinking of like a particular instance where this happens. I think they're posting like the lists of people who died.
Yeah.
And they focus on like Sisko's reaction.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I guess maybe what's important is more Kirk's reaction.
I think they put it on Kirk here. I think I think Shatner takes it on pretty well.
Definitely a more serious Kirk episode.
Mm-hmm. I liked his little. I also liked his little speech at the beginning, at the wedding. We'll see that the lines from that are used in actually an upcoming Picard Speaks Them, which is a nice little Easter egg.
Do you think any weddings have taken place on submarines?
I bet. History is long. I bet there has been a wedding on a submarine. I would bet money.
Do you think they're still going to be playing Here Comes the Bride in the future?
When did that start?
It's very 50s, I would think. I mean, I don't know. I assume that it started in like 1949.
I know a lot of like wedding stuff is 20th century. Stuff.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, no, it'll persist. So obviously you could do a whole podcast episode on many of these episodes, including this, but we broad strokes touched upon it. But anything else you wanted to say about the episode, Adriel?
I thought that the title was kind of strange. Actually, I was like, this seems like I feel like that about a couple of them. Actually, I mean, some of the titles of the episode, they're not that important, but they kind of are. I mean, they're the title, and they say the title. It's not just like episode 3 or whatever. I thought Balance of Terror was like a sort of straight, like a weird title, but I did like it. Anyway, that was the only thing I was gonna say.
It's sort of like a cat and mouse, like there's we could go into. I love all the little moments of like them, oh, let's try to seem like an echo, which again is from that movie. Cool. Or okay, we're gonna put the bodies in the rubble to make it seem. There's a lot of great. Like I don't want to get into the minutia, but there's a lot of good just like back and forth like that. So I don't know, a Balance of Terror. I think it sells me on it. I don't know.
Yeah, it fits, but it's just not as good as some of the other ones, which we're about to talk about. But yeah, great episode, great ep.
Captain's log, no star date. McCoy has changed the course of time. What are you? I am the guardian of forever. Now.
All right, come on.
Oh, how careless of your wife to let you go out that way.
What?
One day soon, man is going to be able to harness incredible energies, maybe even the atom.
Speculation. I find her most uncommon, Mr. Spock.
Murderers! Assassins!
I'm in love with Edith Keeler.
Edith Keeler must die.
Load him!
Well, speaking of cool episode titles, let's talk about City on the Edge of Forever.
That's the best title I've ever heard in my life. City on the Edge of Forever is so sick as a title.
This one doesn't make sense, and it's actually something from the original script that was taken out, but it still works. And it's actually, I don't know if you know this is considered by many like the best episode of Star Trek. Which it's not my favorite, but I get it. But
I get it, and I had definitely seen it before, because when I started watching it, I was like, wait a minute, I remember this, but I didn't remember what happened. I just was like, I know that I've seen this because I remember the portal or whatever, but I was like, I don't remember what happened. So that's
lots of iconic stuff in this episode for sure. So it's season 1, episode 28, April 6th, 1967. This was written by, the original script was written by Harlan Ellison, who he's an extremely influential science fiction writer. Like, again, someone you could do a whole episode on his life. He wrote the original script, and they made changes to it for the shooting script, and he was actually not happy with the changes that Gene Roddenberry made, and he actually tried to he has like one of those pen names you put on stuff that you don't like, and he tried to do that, but Gene Roddenberry like threatened him if he tried to do that, so he stuck with it
with physical violence.
But if you're interested, actually there's been like a novelization of the script, and then there was a comic. They did a comic based off his original script, and we don't have to get too much into it, but he did change certain, like there were things in there, like there was like a Starfleet officer who was like dealing drugs, and they changed it, like McCoy got accidentally drugged up, but anyway, then they go down to this planet and they find the city on the edge of forever, and that's where they find the Guardian, and there's all this crazy stuff in it.
Cool.
But we don't have time to get into that. But it's out there. The comics are out there if you're interested. And this was also directed by Joseph Pevney, who's tied for the most TOS episodes. He directed 14. And he was nominated for 3 Hugo Awards and won one, I believe, for this episode. In fact, actually, both versions of the script won awards. So the original Harlan Ellison script and the shooting script for the show. So how about that?
The script for the show was great, I thought. But that's why I'm sort of interested in what this other one. I mean, it sounds like it's
a little darker.
Significantly. It looks significantly different, but yeah, interesting.
The summary on Memory Alpha is: Kirk and Spock go back in time to save McCoy and their own universe.
Basically.
I don't really have... I guess I didn't write a lot of notes for this. But Adriel, what'd you think? What'd you think of the episode?
This is a beautiful episode. I really like when Star Trek is in a different time period, because they do that on like the holodeck, is that what it's called, right?
That was born out of like, we've got these sets from all these other shows on the
awesome
CBS Paramount lot, I think it was, and so they would go, they could go to Wagon Train or whatever and do a Western episode, or the Nazi planet or whatever, so this was the New York it's just like some set, but
or whatever this is. Yeah, Omaha could be anywhere. It was like I just really enjoy when they have, because I mean it's just such a great, the actors are so great anyway. And in some ways it's like when you see like, I don't know, like a writer that does sci-fi but then they also do, you know, whatever, historical fiction or romance or something, and you're like, oh, this is like a totally different side of you, even though you're doing the same thing, you're playing the same character, you know. So in this one they are in, I guess it's what, 1930, that's what they say. And it's just it, and they're like they're stuck there for a while. They're stuck there until they can like figure out like what goes wrong and what they have to fix and how they can get back. And I just think that I thought that the plot was really wonderful, which is just that like William Shatner falls in love with this like really beautiful like woman, or not, she's not beautiful, she's a beautiful soul because she's like this like pacifist and she has like this really beautiful vision of the future, but
she's also beautiful.
She's beautiful as well.
Joan Collins is the actress playing.
She's a babe,
Keeler.
Of course.
Yeah, mega babe.
But that, you know, she basically has, if she survives, if her plan, which is basically she's a pacifist and she rises to power sort of and fame, and because of her platform, the United States enters World War II later than the Nazis win World War II. That's the plot. And then so in the real version of history, she dies, and then pacifism does not gain traction, and the United States enters World War II and then wins the war. So, they very quickly realize like she has to like die, or they have to like make sure she isn't prevented from dying, is what it is. So it's just is like such a, you just sort of know, again, surprising but inevitable. You like know that it's coming, but you don't want it to, and it has to happen, and it just is a really like simple and powerful plot, I think, you know. Plus there's what the surprising part is, you're like, where the hell is Bones? Like what happened to it? And like he's running around like a crazy person. He's so good.
Can I tell you,
like so theatrical. It's so awesome. Yeah.
My favorite moment in the episode is related to him. Do you know what it is?
Is it the one where he sees the dude in the
and he's like still
street? Yeah,
he's still freaking out, but you can tell he's so smart, you know what I mean? Like these Starfleet officers are so smart, and he's like talking to the guy, and he's like, seems like Earth, and he looks up and he goes, the constellations are right. I love that. He's my favorite part about the episode. I love his scenes with Edith. Like later on, when he's coming to, and they're really like he's so sweet, you know. Like, McKenna, what do you think about the episode?
It's an incredibly fucked up, devastating, but also very comical episode.
It's very silly. Often
they've got this whole fish out of water thing going on, and classic Kirk sees a woman and is just instantly like, oh, a woman.
Yeah, he's not as outrageous as he's made out to be often, like the movies.
This episode did make me think that. I was like, he's really like less of a rake and more of just like a romantic, like, oh wow, I've fallen in love with her.
There's certainly episodes where he's like, oh, maybe I gotta like put the moves on this person or whatever. But that doesn't happen as much as is played out. There is a bit of a myth about that. But it does, look, he does kiss a lot of ladies.
Yeah.
Who looks into my eyes and is like, you gotta let your crush on all these Star Trek guys go.
But yeah, it is common. Like there's times where it's like, buddy, you shouldn't be getting into this, you know?
Right. Just like from the get-go, and you know, Bones runs into the gate, they realize they're stuck because their ship's gone, and then they go through it, and it's like, we're stuck here. There's like multiple levels of we're stuck. Before they go in, they tell the rest of the crew, like, if we don't come back, you gotta go in.
Yeah.
At least then you'll be stuck in a society instead of on this abandoned planet.
The way they jump through the portals is always funny too.
Funny. I know.
Very cheesy. I love it.
The jumping is crazy. Like they maybe could have done it differently, but they just kind of like lunge into it. It's pretty good.
I love the Guardian of Forever. He's just like, they're using it later in the one episode to like go back and study, but I like in this, he's like, good luck. Like, you can try to jump through here. I'm not gonna hold your hand.
Yeah, I liked him. I liked that portal voice in the cartoon that we watched later. The voice was not as
there's a reason for that.
Convincing.
We can talk. Remind me to talk about that.
Okay, I will.
That it's sort of like that makes me think of like why like this version of Star Trek feels more of an anthology show than later ones, and obviously like there's continuity stuff in all of them, but this episode feels so like, it's obviously science fiction, but it's so magical in a lot of ways, you know. Like, it's just like, I'm a portal, and they go there and they're like, how do we know like we're gonna even see him? And Spock's got this whole thing of like, well, there's this theory about how time has like shores and eddies, and you're washed to certain, and it's a little bit like, I don't know if they really explore that as much in the series. Like, if you think of, what was it, past tense, the big Deep Space Nine episode, McKenna, like where they go back to contemporary America, like there's a bit more of like jargon explaining it. I guess there's like maybe there's an orb, and I don't remember, but you know, there's a bit more to it, whereas here it's a bit sort of more fantastical, you know. So I find it very fun in this episode that it's like, it gets the story to where it needs to be, you know. You don't really need to think about that so much, you know.
I gotta say that I will, like, not to think about it too deeply, but I think that there's something like so charming again about this like anthology type thing about, and this like fantasy aspect of Star Trek, which is that like, you know, like they're not trying to mine this like crazy portal to the past. They're not trying to say like, okay, well, we have to tell everybody about this. Like, this is something that has to be like, we can make money off this, or we can like do something with this. Like, they just let it be. You know what I mean? Like, they just allow this to exist as this like crazy thing that happened, and then they just like leave it alone. And I know that that's just the virtue of the show being like, okay, well, we need to have these like plot devices to tell the stories we want, but I find that there's something like this underlying current that I think is really charming, which is like, you know, the universe is full of mysteries, and like we don't get to own them, you know. It's kind of cool.
It's like, you do you, except we will in that one cartoon episode come back and use you.
They do come back when they're like, well, wait we have something important to do. You know, it's dubiously canon, though. We'll say. So, yeah. One last thing I was going to say about William Shatner and being a romantic or a rake or whatever is like, I didn't think that him falling in love with her was actually that consequential. Like, he was a stand-in for the viewer. Like, we love her because she's you know, she's forthright and she's a bit like hard-headed, but she's like an organizer, but she's also she's generous, but she's not like a bleeding heart. I mean, she's just this like magnetic, interesting character that's like really has like powerful in her own right. So it's sad that when we find out like she has to die, you know, and so like
must die.
Yeah. And even if, you know, he wasn't in love with her, you know, he's sort of the stand-in for her. It's not about like, oh, I'm in love with her and this is sad. It's just like, oh man, she's so awesome and she's got to die.
Yeah, I think really a lot about her character is kind of it really directly parallels like Starfleet and their values. And, you know, she's talking about a future that's basically what they've established. And, you know, they share her pacifist values. And so, like, not even just killing her off because Kirk has fallen in love with her, but killing her off knowing that she is advocating for their values, which, you know, if it was them, they would want to be pacifist.
Yes.
But they have to stop the pacifist movement to prevent death.
Yeah, I mean, to stop the Nazis from, It's, I went with her kind of Kirk falling in love, and you talked about her qualities. I love that scene where she's got their number, you know, and I love that part where Spock says something to Kirk and she's like, "Captain." Like, even when you don't say it, it's there. You know, that's such a good part.
Yeah.
And
she's great.
We talked about the trifecta of these three main characters in the show. Like, we talked about how, like, those Romulans represented it. And I talked about Decius, or whatever his name was, is like, he jumps in. He kind of almost has, like, the Spock part where he's like, we got to do this. And that was really present here. You have, like, Bones as always just, like, he's kind of like the heart of it all, you know? Like, he like, purely, you know, what he thinks about what's morally right. You know, he's an emotional guy. Spock is like, this is the mission. And Kirk is like, has to, like, contend with these two things. And that's one of the things they actually changed from the original script. I don't remember how it exactly happened, but they changed it for this, I believe, where in the end, Kirk has to hold McCoy back from, like, helping her. And I think that really, like, ties it all together, I guess. So, like, with his character, you know, it's like he has both of these thoughts inside of him, you know, and he has to, at the end, make that hard choice. And then when they come back, he sells it really well, and he's like, let's get the hell out of here. You know, I love that ending.
It's so good. Yeah. I mean, it's also just as, like, it's so, I love when they have these, like, big politically kind of relevant things. I mean, like, because they do this, like, interesting thing where they make her this character that's, like, she's reminiscent of, like, Alice Paul and, like, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucy Stone and Susan B. Anthony. I mean, she's like this, like, like, character that seems that she really is, like, evoking, like, these, like, real people that existed. And they just, like, I don't know, they do but then it's like they also are talking about the real World War II and the real Nazis and all this stuff while they have these, I don't know, I just love when Star Trek veers into that. It's really fun, as opposed to, like, more, like, metaphorical things, which are more, I think, common, because it's like it's all an allegory kind of. But yeah, I like when they get overt with it.
And I could see this is another way of reckoning kind of with World War II. They don't really address it, but they talk about how they needed to beat them before the Nazis got the A-bomb. They don't really talk about us using it or anything. And I know at the time too, this is like the Vietnam War was going on, so that's always on there. There's a lot of episodes like that. So, I mean, I don't know if they're trying to say anything about that necessarily, but I'm sure that was on their mind. And so. Yeah,
absolutely.
There's more explicit Vietnam sort of based episodes that maybe we'll talk about someday. But
it interesting. Yeah, I would like to watch those, and the Cold War stuff too later too, because you know I love Cold War stories.
Yeah, I mean there's some, we'll talk about them. There's some in the original series as well that we'll hit on, right?
Because that's happening too. Yeah, like the Cold War and like the aftermath of World War II and the Vietnam War and the Korean War. I mean, there's, like, so much going. No wonder the 60s were, like, such a hotbed of shit.
It's interesting, like, Starfleet at times can be a stand-in for the United States, or, like, an alien can be, and it's kind of a bit flexible. Because if you start thinking about it on the larger scale, it breaks down a little bit. It doesn't fully work.
Yeah.
But that's why, like, even in the later shows where there's more of a continuity, they're a bit flexible with their metaphors and things like that. So you kind of have to take them all as they come. You can't think of Starfleet as the perfect stand-in for the United States, but they will at times put them in that situation. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's cool to have a flexible. I mean, the metaphor, because there's never a one-to-one metaphor. I mean, it's really smart the way that they've done it. So yeah, it's cool.
Anything else about this episode? Iconic, classic.
Yeah, really good.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool. And great title.
Captain's log, stardate 3372.7. First Officer Spock seems to be under stress.
If I want anything from you, I'll ask for it.
You don't get him to Vulcan within a week, 8 days at the outside, he'll die.
I await you.
Who is she?
My wife.
She chooses the challenge. She will choose thy champion. This one. This combat is to the death.
Dead.
Okay, so we'll rate the titles. Let's talk about the next episode. The next episode is called Amok Time.
Not a great title.
Yeah,
Not a great title.
Yeah, it's a little odd, but they've brought it back. I think what show isn't Strange New Worlds? They have an episode called like Spock Amok or something. Yeah. All right. Anyway, this is season 2, episode 5. But I also saw say it was the season premiere. I don't know. September 15th, 1967, written by Theodore Sturgeon, who won or was nominated for a Hugo for this episode. I don't remember. And again, it was directed by Joseph Pevney, who we just discussed. And the description on Memory Alpha is Spock undergoes the Vulcan mating ceremony. So
it's awesome.
This episode, yes, it introduces so much of the Vulcan lore. The Pon farr, the Vulcan salute. Theodore Sturgeon here, he created the live long and prosper. And of course, some of the naming conventions, we previously only knew Spock, so, and now they have female characters too. So they got the T apostrophe thing going on. Anyway, Adriel, what'd you think about the episode?
Trying to think when I shed a tear in this one, because now I
cry?
Can't remember. But I did. I think that it was like when it was at some point when they were like fighting, or he was like, I really don't want to have to like do this, and you're like, oh man, like they're gonna have to get out of this somehow, because the series has to continue and he can't kill Kirk. But I feel like that must have been some of it. But I liked this episode a lot. I thought that like it was fun to see a different side of Spock here. You're introduced to him in this episode with him throwing the borscht or whatever out of his quarters,
yelling.
And he's like, get it! I didn't ask for this. He's like so upset, and then he's like, he's really sort of like ashamed of this like mating ritual that he has to like engage with, and I really liked the T'Pring. That's her name, right?
T'Pring. Yeah.
The woman that he's like, the Vulcan woman who he's engaged to or whatever. More than an engagement, less than a wedding is what he calls it. And I loved her. I thought she was awesome. It felt like a little bit of a breather after the last one, which was like really heavy and like very consequential, like in like global universe history. And this one felt a little bit more intimate and more like just like almost an action movie,
Yeah, and it's a bit more fun because you get to like learn a bit more about like what Vulcans are actually like, you know, like there's a lot of ideas people have about Vulcans, like just from like pop culture or whatever, but like they're not as like perfect as, I guess, like if you actually watch Star Trek, like you will learn that the Vulcans aren't like these infallible pure logical beings. So but yeah, McKenna, what do you think about the episode?
Yeah, I love Spock in the beginning of the episode where you're just like, what is going on with this man? Like, why is he just...
We should have watched the one where they all get space drunk, because that's when he has like the big breakdown.
Whoa.
But I think every series, in fact, they basically remade it for episode 2 of TNG. But I think every series has like episode where they all get space drunk. So maybe one day we'll like when we've gone farther, we'll like see like how does Deep Space Nine, I don't know if they all do it, but how does Voyager handle, you know, and maybe we'll do like a pack of everyone getting, because that's actually, it's weird because they always do it early in the shows, but it's like a way to tell you about all the characters. But it's actually,
what do you mean space drunk as opposed to just regular drunk?
Like they encounter something that makes everyone intoxicated. That there's episodes like that. Anyway, in that you see like that's one of the key moments where your Spock has a breakdown. He has a moment with Nurse Chapel. Didn't she had some stuff in this episode, right?
Yeah, she did. Yeah.
It's kind of few and far between, but they have sort of a implied history in this show, but they don't really fully get into it.
Not like Data and whoever the other lady was.
Tasha, yeah. Well,
yeah.
Actually, they probably give more time to it in this than Data and Tasha ever get, really, but sort of. But
yeah.
Well, they give it more time now in the new show. It's on the ship before Kirk, and this is where they're exploring it now, actually current day on Star Trek. They're exploring this relationship, which is interesting. But anyway, so she was in this episode a little bit, but I love seeing all the like you said, Spock acting out of pocket is quite fun.
Yeah, I liked him being a little crazy. And it was like it is true, like, because I think he says like Kirk is like, you, like, I thought that Vulcans like were pure logical beings, and he's like, yeah, but we pay for it, or something like that. Like he's like, we like there's a time where we're like absolutely batshit crazy, and it's right now, and I'm gonna die if you don't take me home. Like we pay for this kind of logic. And then later on in a future episode that we watched, you also see kind of just like the day-to-day, the daily grind of being just like a pure logical being, and how that's not always good either, of course. But this is definitely a time where you get to see the cost, the inherent cost of living as a Vulcan.
And it sort of connects to the Romulans. He was kind of talking about like the Romulans are more like they didn't develop the same what's his name who created the foundation of logic for the Vulcans. He put out like basically some guy came along and created this new philosophy of being, and they developed into this more like focused on logic culture. So you kind of see that they still have those aspects to them, like similar to the Romulans, who are a bit more warlike, and it's their version of like how they explore it with humanity. In the last episode they did it a little bit where they went back to the Depression and stuff, and they're like what's it's barbaric, they called it. So I like that it's like, again, we're not all, it's the future, we figured a lot out, but we're not all perfect.
I was kind of going to talk about like the end with T'Pring.
So I don't want your busted ass Spock.
you see that they're not completely ruled by logic with this whole love thing. She's in love with another Vulcan, but she uses the logic angle to get out of the Spock connection engagement, whatever, bond, without breaking any rules, like just to jump through so many hoops just to make sure she's like doing things the Vulcan way, but it's all for love. It's just like, what's like the greatest emotion? It's like, all right, Vulcan, so I don't know if you guys are okay. But
yeah, it is true. Like, they're so repressed.
Yes.
In like a crazy way.
If just so we all know, Surak, Surak, is the founder of like Vulcan logic. So
oh.
Yeah, just I don't know when that comes up, but I know that it comes up at some point. So yeah.
I mean, I don't know at all. Like, I don't know the half of it, but it is quite interesting to watch to just like experience these scripts where the characters are saying like these quote unquote like logical things. And of course, like, there is like an element of like a logical argument that's being made sort of, but they have to say at the end of these things, they go logical, purely logical, like just to confirm, because like they're not actually that logical. Like what you're saying, what you were saying, McKenna, about like how she has to like jump through all these hoops, like I guess it's sort of logical, but like it's a testament to it is like maybe not good writing, but really clever writing of like these characters that can like reason their way out of things. And like logic doesn't necessarily mean like that they're wise, Mm-hmm. They're like extremely repressed, and they have these desires, and they have this like latent kind of like almost like animalistic thing going on under the surface. So I don't know, they're an interesting bunch. I like them a lot. And at the end, my favorite part of the whole episode, maybe this is where I cried, when he realizes that Kirk is alive. His name is Jim, right?
Yeah, James T. Kirk. Yeah.
Yeah, because Spock goes, oh, Jim! And he grabs his shoulders and he turns him around, and he's got like the biggest smile I've ever seen. And then he's like, oh, I didn't know that you were still alive.
That's like a Star Trek ending, yeah.
It's so cute. It's like so sweet. Yeah. It's so cute. And he's got just like, because you never get to see him smile, he's like so sweet.
Yeah, smile more, Spock.
He's so cute.
I just like to, this is the first time we ever see Vulcan. I like you see it, and it's very like, it looks like Mars or something, it looks kind of fucked up, actually. And I love just their whole ceremony, and like the gongs and all the stuff they're shaking and stuff. And it's very, because it is very like, it does seem like when you get down there, you're like, okay, it's sort of their ritual, but it seems like outdated, or something like barbaric, I guess, something like that. Mm-hmm. Like they have these battles to the death or whatever.
Yeah, and we would be remiss if we did not also mention the part where Kirk's shirt gets ripped right down the middle.
If that can happen
on the nipple line.
If they can do that in an episode, they will.
I could tell that was, they were like,
shirt off.
Get his nipples out.
Do you ever see the Futurama episode with the cast of the original series?
No.
They put them in like you haven't seen the episode Arena, but they put them in an arena type, like a put them down battle to the death, and there's a part where Shatner like cuts his uniform like just while they're
That's awesome.
Yeah,
and then just like the little like red paint, like the blood streak across his chest is so awesome.
So perfect. Yeah.
Oh, I have an administrative logistical question. Were these originally in black and white?
No.
They were originally in color.
They were originally in color. you probably, depending on how you watched them, I'm almost 99% sure you did watch like a remaster, which
I watched them on Paramount Plus.
Yeah, so like I don't know if you noticed sometimes with like the ship shots, they were updated in like 2007 or something. So like some of the effects you would have seen were more computer effects that differ from the original, but like otherwise the like looks of stuff, like it was, pretty much how they looked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Color. I thought that they were in color, but I couldn't be sure.
It's a very colorful show. We were talking one episode we were watching where like every shot is a different color in the same room. Like they totally lost their cool interior decorating style by the time TNG rolls around. Well, it has its own style, but
they got fun like furniture.
Yeah.
And
it's very like pastel, like 80s, 90s, like.
Yeah, this is so 60s, as we'll see in the next episode. It's like extreme 60s.
Yeah. You were gonna say something, McKenna?
Oh, I was just gonna say something about the shirt. It just reminded me of the Star Wars episode 2, Attack of the Clones, in the Coliseum scene where Padme's white outfit gets perfectly ripped up into a crop top.
Yeah.
Oh my god, great call out. Yes. Perfect totally accidental crop top.
Yeah.
So we talked about the Vulcan stuff. We talked about the characters. T'Pau, Celia Lovsky played her. Really great, really kind of set the tone, I think, for like, she's being this important person in their society. Actually, the actress, just a fun fact, she was married to Peter Lorre, and she's actually I read on her Memory Alpha page, she's actually responsible for him getting his role in Fritz Lang's M. And I don't know, that's like a Hollywood power couple, if you ask me.
Hell yeah. And she was awesome. There's a lot, Star Trek in general, the ones that I've seen have a lot of like really awesome like older lady actors, which is pretty tight.
Yes, the ones who talk like that was so good. And then when we have some TNG episodes where they pull some people from that era still, and it's like, ooh, well, even think of like Diana Muldaur, Dr. Pulaski was in the original series. Anyway, T'Pring, you mentioned her, Arlene Martel. She was great. And of course, we got the Romulan dude back as Stan, and he seemed like a perfect guy in this.
Yeah, he was great. I was like, yeah, I get it. She likes him. He's got the sauce. I don't know.
And what'd you think? So, we saw, Vulcan is really, I love the way it looks in the motion picture, that opening scene where Spock he's going through the Kolinar, which is like to rid himself of emotion or whatever, which I feel like all these episodes have to paint that in a slightly different light. But I don't know, it was just cool to see like the origin here. But that it sets up, that scene goes so hard in the movie, and it's like I feel like it's even better now when you've seen this,
Fuck yeah.
Like they've got these hard ass metal rituals.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, it's funny, like it does, like it makes sense that they're from this like desolate kind of I don't know, like, because at first I was like, okay, it wouldn't make sense if they were coming from like a metropolis, right? Like if like they would be much more, not necessarily, but it just seems like there's something that makes sense about the way that Vulcans are, that they're from a more kind of like barren, desolate,
kind of harsh, it seems,
harsh place. Like they're not like they and they're sort of rigid and insular in a way. I don't know. It seems like it makes it like it. If they were from like a big metropolis, they would probably have a lot more, perhaps like diversity in their thinking. But they all seem to adhere to like a similar kind of logic. So I don't know. It kind of made sense in a like it subverts the expectation, but it also feels it makes a lot of sense. So I liked it. And it was it just is very good background for our buddy Spock.
Yeah, maybe someday we'll be talking about Enterprise. Because I think that's where you really see, like, they're kind of full of it. The Vulcans are really full of it. T'Pau's in that, I believe, at some point, too. You young T'Pau. But, and T'Pring, like Chapel, she's a reoccurring character on the current Star Trek show. So maybe someday this might be something, like, maybe you'll check it out.
She's really funny on it. The Vulcans are very funny.
Spoiler, they do an episode where they do a Freaky Friday. Spock and T'Pring.
Whoa.
And they have to do each other's job. It's really funny.
Hell yeah.
Captain's log, stardate 3842.3. The Enterprise has been assigned to transport ambassadors of Federation planets to this vitally important council.
Mr. Spock, we'll leave orbit in 2 hours. Would you care to beam down and visit your parents?
Ambassador Sarek and his wife are my parents.
We favor admission.
You favor? Why? You call us thieves?
Devote yourself to motivations of passion or gain.
My father is quite capable of killing.
Oh, go to him now, please.
I cannot.
Doctor, his heart stopped.
Rate the episode title, Journey to Babel. Babel?
He says Babel, but
Journey
I thought
to
it was
Babel.
Babel.
All right. Season 2, episode 15, November 17th, 1967. Written by D.C. Fontana, who we've talked about before. She was one of the OG great writers of Star Trek, and she wrote one of that, I forgot which app, but The Heart of Glory, I think, TNG. But she's really known for her work here on the original series, and it was, again, directed by Joseph Pevney. And the summary: as the Enterprise comes under attack on the way to a diplomatic conference on Babel, one of the alien dignitaries is murdered. And Spock's estranged father, Sarek, is the prime suspect. But he is also deathly ill, and only Spock can save him. There's a lot going on in this episode.
I was just going to say, this episode did suffer a bit from just like way too much happening. They could have cut. I don't know how they could have cut it, though. I mean, it all is relevant, but like so much is going on in this episode.
This is the one where I was like, before we started, I was like, I gotta read a synopsis before I do this.
It all makes sense, though. Yeah. It all makes sense when you really look at it. And the script was really born out of, actually, if you really look into it, DC Fontana was really, like, had this idea, like, she really wanted to explore. That's the thing. Actually, she wrote the next episode, too. And what I find fascinating about her writing is she has these really strong ideas about, like, these characters and their backstories that she really wants to work out. And you can tell she's, like, extremely passionate about developing these characters. And I think she did an awesome job in this episode with Jane Wyatt, who played Amanda, and Mark Leonard, who played Sarek, Spock's parents. Like, obviously the other stuff with the murder and the dignity, I don't really care about that, but I think it served a purpose to, like, get the plot moving, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, maybe they could have just had it where his father's sick or something, but I thought that they added that extra element where he has to kind of, like, defend him or something, like, made it a little bit more interesting. So
yeah, I feel like they could have, like, it was crazy that it was like the ambassador luncheon or whatever the hell is going on.
That was where
at
it was
the same
colorful,
time. No, that scene. Okay, now I love that scene. I don't want them to cut it, but like the main plot was about Spock's father being sick, and the only way to save him is for Spock to help him out or whatever. But Spock is like, he's put in this position where he's like, I can either help my dad and save my dad, or I can save like a bunch of other people. And that's not exactly what happens. That's not exactly true. But like they could have done that plot without it being like all this crazy shit with like the like emissaries, and then there's the Andorians, and someone's like a plant. Much happens. But to be fair, I loved all that shit, so I wouldn't want them to change it. So I don't know.
Well, we can mention it briefly. This is the first appearance of the Andorians and the Tellarites, who we're not going to see a lot in some more 90s Trek, but when they've gone back now with Enterprise that they did in the 2000s, and now the current show that are more set in this era, they and even some later ones, I think going back to that era caused the series to be like, oh yeah, we can, these are like cool. Like they were trying to think of like who would be early Starfleet or whatever Federation members, and they've kind of brought them back, but we're not going to see them a ton. Actually, we saw them when Lal was trying to pick a body. There was like one of them was a green Tellarite thing. That's like really the only Tellarite I can think of in. Yeah, sad. But anyway, they're interesting. Like a kind of like a blue. I like their designs. The eyes for the pig mask are a little freaky. They kind of improved. Those.
That pig mask was fucked up. I thought about that for like a while afterwards. I was like, I did not like watching that. I like pulled up a picture and like showed Margaret, and she was like, what the hell is that? Yeah, scary stuff. Those Tellarites.
Worked out that design later, but they're
it was jarring only because like so much of like there's some like design things about it, and like there's some hokey things about the original series, but like by and large it's not like that. So it was like pretty jarring, where I was like, whoa, these guys look like fucked up and scary.
Yeah. One of the main characters actually on the Nickelodeon show that they did a few years ago was a Tellarite. He's much more lovable. And then I thought the Andorian looked cool, and Andorians we see a lot more of now. We like, yeah. So, but whatever. They're not that important. Sarek and Amanda are what's important. McKenna, what do you think about them?
Those two specifically.
Yeah.
I love Amanda. It's really funny just seeing this like this all like Sarek just seems like all the Vulcans are logic based, but he just seems like extra uptight about it.
He's such a dickhead,
but he married a human. And it's just like sometimes you're watching and you're like, how did this happen?
Their dynamic
Which they
is
kind of make a joke about at the end. So it's she's like the link between him and Spock. Kind of a mediator almost, but
she's appealed to his human side as well when they talk,
but ultimately they each have to figure it out. Spock and Sarek. She gets real upset at Spock.
Yeah, I love
episode.
Yeah, it owns.
It's just like such a like, you're human too. Remember, why can't you remember that? He's, he kind of hides behind this like, oh, I gotta do my duty.
Yeah.
And my father will appreciate that more.
I think that actually, thinking of the plot, that's kind of one way where it worked, where they kind of had to incapacitate Kirk to make Spock in command. Like, I think that was a clever bit of writing, because then he had more of a, like, I can't give this up, even though he could probably.
Well, yeah, because he, like, I guess Kirk, he's back up, and he's trying to get Spock, to go back and donate blood. He's like, I got this. You go do that. That's important.
Mm-hmm.
So it does like kind of chip off of the logic angle.
That Kirk fight was great too. The hallway fight.
I was gonna say the Kirk fight was one of my favorite things we watched. There's a lot of really great stuff in this episode.
Their fighting reminds me of like when we would have like stage, like people come to our high school and teach us how to like stage fight, you know, like,
where you do the slap and then you like slap your hand or whatever.
Kind of wrestling with it. But there's something I also like about it because they are like genuinely getting physical and there's not like a lot of cuts. So obviously it doesn't look as like hard hitting or realistic or something, but there is like a level of physicality that they're giving to it that like, I don't know, it's a little silly, but it's also very engaging. You know what I mean? So I enjoy the fight. There's some better fight scenes in TOS too. Like I think there's one where Kirk gets like a big wrench and he's fighting a guy with a big wrench. But anyway, like I like the when they get into fights on TOS.
Yeah, I mean it the same happened in I felt the same way about Bones in the City on the Edge of Forever when he's like, "You're never gonna take me alive" or whatever, and they like are like holding him back, and he's like fighting, and he's like, "I'll fucking kill you guys before you kill me first," you know, whatever. Yeah. And he's like really like that was like pretty believable. I was like, oh, he's really going for it. He's got his stage. He practiced this. They blocked this out, you know, and they did also as well in this episode. But this fight was more like an actual fight, which made it like more choreographed and like a little bit more hokey. But I loved it. No notes. I loved it. Although there's a great part when he gets stabbed and then he's like kind of holding his back, and then the only cut is when they like he like you see him again and then he like pulls his hand out and there's like blood on it and you're like yeah they had to cut that, but
sure. Yeah,
it was good. Another point about Spock and like the logic point is that, I mean, it seems like maybe so in TNG there's like several, like especially with who's my boyfriend in that one? There's lots of them, but Riker.
Riker, yes. This is actually very reminiscent of the episode where his dad shows up, Riker's dad.
Yes, but also the episode where he has to go and like be the captain of like the other ship or something. I forget exactly what happens, but he has to like assume the position of being captain, and like there's like it's in Star Trek universe, like they have to sometimes, like there's a chain of command, and if someone's incapacitated, someone else has to take over. And so it seems like Spock could also like just entrust the person below him to take care of things, but he doesn't. But they don't ever talk about that. But you know what I mean? That would be
Scotty then, I think. You want Scotty to be in charge? I don't know who actually it would be, but
yeah, I guess we don't know. That's kind of the issue here.
Maybe he's like, I don't trust that ex guy.
Like falls up.
He's gunning for my job.
Yeah.
There's a Sulu? I don't know.
What about Bones? I guess he's just the doctor.
No, it's not Bones.
And also he's busy. He's very busy.
Bones
in this
is
episode.
Too busy. Yeah.
Yeah. This is the episode where at the end he's like, "Ha ha! I finally get the last word," and he says it directly to the camera.
I love
so
it.
Awesome.
Yeah, great episode. Sarek is such a good character. This is not the last we'll have seen of him. Not even, I mean, in this episode, like there'll be more Sarek in the future and more Mark Leonard to come that we'll talk about someday. Anything else we want to say about this one? It's great episode.
Yeah, I mean, Amanda is so awesome. Just another like another hot lady, a hot like 40 plus 50 plus year old lady. I just really like what they're doing with this.
We'll get some more Amanda.
She's got who's the doctor in TNG who looks kind of like her.
Are we talking Pulaski?
Yes.
Oh, yes, yeah. I
got
said her name earlier. Now,
is it like as in Pulaski, like the Pulaski Bridge and Pulaski Day, like that?
Yeah, Doctor.
Wow.
Yeah.
Huh, I didn't realize that it was. I was going to say Kojutsko, and if there's any New York listeners out here, that's another Polish name. That's
okay.
Streets in New York. There's a Pulaski Bridge in Greenpoint, but there's also a Kojutsko Street, and I was going to call her Kojutsko, but anyway, they have similar like hot older lady vibes, and I'm really I dig it.
Love.
I like what they're doing here. Anyway, great episode. Really liked it.
Great episode. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, actually, I just want to insert really quick. You made me think of that scene in City on the Edge of Forever, where Kirk tries to pass Spock as Chinese. That's a little fucked up.
I forgot about that. I had for that was the part that I cried, but no.
Wait, when did you cry in this one? What? Did you cry in Journey to Babel? Journey to Babel?
I can't remember where now because they're so goofy, but I did because I know that there was in every single episode there was a moment where I had to wipe them away a little bit, but it was probably when she was like, "Why can't you just like relent and understand that like you are human as well," or whatever. That whole scene was probably where it was.
Oh, yeah, just another note on City on the Edge of Forever is, like, Bones, being in this state of insanity and then, like, finally coming to, but he's in old Earth.
Yeah.
And
and he's like...
This is a just continuing insanity.
Yeah, where he's like, I've decided that you're real. And she's like, I know, I have a friend who talks a lot like you. Would you like to meet him? I love that.
Yeah. They're so good.
They do that bit. Spoilers. We'll watch this. We actually will watch this someday, but there's a holodeck episode on TNG where they go back to like, I can't remember. Like, it's like a noir parody. So, but there's a guy, Dick Miller, actually, who asks, like, I think it's him. Maybe it's someone else. Anyway, they're like, what's the deal with Data? And they're like, or Data might even say, I can't remember who says it, but they're like, he's South American.
Yeah.
That one's funny because it doesn't make any sense, I don't think.
I actually thought about that before he even said it. I was like, is he going to try and pass him off as a South American?
The Chinese one is a little too...
It's too... Yeah, especially like 1930 also. I don't know.
Is it the Romulans who originally had like Chinese names?
I don't know. I mean, there's a bit of like kind of like Fu Manchu stuff with some Klingons. There's some racial stuff with it. Klingons maybe is there. I mean, they put them in brown face or whatever. But we'll cover that on a different day. Let's move on.
Captain's log supplemental. When we were in the time vortex, something appears to have changed the present as we know it. No one aboard recognizes Mr. Spock. The only answer is that the past was somehow altered.
Yesteryear. Season 1, Episode 2 of the animated series from September 15th, 1973. Written by D.C. Fontana and directed by Hal Sutherland, who directed a lot of the animated series. I think all of like season 1 and some of season 2. Spock travels back in time to prevent his death as a young Vulcan.
So we're supposed to remind you about the voice.
Yeah, so they're there. They're just kind of like willy-nilly going through. No big deal.
Yeah.
So, okay. So, Mark Leonard reprises his role as Sarek. I guess, what was the actress's name? Jane Wyatt wasn't available or something like that. I kind of think it was more like they're probably like... So the way it worked often on the animated series is because of how animated shows are done. Like they're trying to avoid having to add more actors to the voice cast. So in a lot of episodes, like many of the episodes, like random characters are like voiced by like James Doohan, who plays Scotty. Like he just does a ton of characters on the show. So he actually does the Guardian in this episode. He does the voice.
That's why it sounds so insane.
And then a lot of times, I believe, when they had like extra female roles and stuff, it was often given to Majel Barrett, who does Nurse Chapel and other characters that you haven't met yet in TNG. But boy, I'm so excited to introduce you to some characters she plays, or a character. But anyway, so she did Amanda in this, and they voice pitched her a bit to sound like her, and then James Doohan did The Guardian Forever. And so I forgot the actor who did the original, but he has that, it's iconic, this big booming voice, you know. So
right.
I think they decided, look, it's not that worth it to do it for this. You know, you can tell the animated show has a bit of a budget. But cool,
it does
fun vibes.
Listen, I love the opener of the animated show, by the way. That's my favorite opener.
It's very cool.
It's so rad. And that's where all the money went. And I was like, I'm about to love, like, this is going to be my favorite Star Trek series. And then I started watching it and I was like, listen, I like what they're doing here, but it is a budget show. I could tell.
It's a great show in a lot of ways, though, because sorry, I'll let you finish. But they do a lot of episodes where they tackle like pretty heady sci-fi concepts in like a short amount of time for kids, and I think a lot of them end up being a little batshit because of it. But they're also very interesting and like cool and like wild. You know, I love almost every episode of the animated series I've seen. But anyway, yeah. Sorry, what was?
Well, I was just gonna say, like, is it because it's more like it is a kids show, because of course, like now, right, we're like, oh, and just because it's animated doesn't mean it's for kids, you know. But like at the time, this was like the kids version of Star Trek. Not that the other one was like not appropriate for kids, but it was too like boring or whatever.
Yeah, and it was I think mainly meant for kids, right? But there were, at the time too, this is 1973, so the motion picture came out 79, and I forgot, it was 69 the original series ended, and there was this gap, and there was like these diehard fans who wanted to bring it back. And the original premise was,
I see,
they say in the opening of the original series that they're on a 5-year mission, but there's only 3 seasons of the original show. Like fans it wasn't even supposed to go that long. Like they kept wanting to cancel it. Fans did like letter writing campaigns to keep it alive. And that only the 3rd season is considered not great, and so there are great episodes, but you know, it got canceled, and so the 2 seasons of the animated series are almost viewed as, like, I think they're presented as like, this is the continuing mission, like it's supposed to be
interesting.
That, but you know, obviously things are it's a bit like they do things in this that they couldn't normally do on the regular show, which is one of the things that's interesting about it, is you'll see more interesting scenarios or alien races that they could never, and Gene Roddenberry encouraged that, like, look, you can put some wild ass aliens in here that
and like the animal, which is the big thing in this one, is like this big like crazy pet, but they also they mentioned that pet in the previous episode where they're like, the
teddy bear,
he's like, oh, a teddy bear. He liked a teddy bear. Ha ha ha. Like, gonna make fun of him. And he's like, it was huge and he had saber teeth or whatever.
and
then
it was.
The pet comes up in this one. And this was when where the water works with this fucking cat or whatever. I was like,
okay,
oh, God.
So should we, what did you think about the episode, McKenna?
That was this is the moment I said earlier, was my one moment I was thinking of where I got emotional.
Yeah. So Spock travels back in time and he helps his young self go through some another Vulcan ceremony. And again, props to DC Fontana, because she wanted to do more with these characters that she created. And I think she did a lot with that in this short amount of time of this episode with Sark and everything. But One thing she also wanted to do, she talked a lot about this, is it was kind of a controversial episode because she sort of wanted to address euthanasia and she's like talks about how when you're a kid and your pet dies, it's really hard to deal with. And she actually thought like this might be a good outlet to help children like understand that, you know? And so, yeah, he helps younger Spock go through a trial, but it also like costs the life of his pet and stuff, and he helps deal with it. And it's surprisingly very deep and emotional for, this kind of janky production.
I know. Show, yeah, I wasn't expecting that at all. I was like, wait a minute. We can't go there on this show.
They went
and
there.
Like, because there were none of the like flags, none of the markers at the beginning of the episode. Like the animal is like cute, or he's not cute. Like it's just I don't know. It's not overly cute. I don't know. It just was like, it didn't make you think he was going to die.
Yeah.
And then, and also he's old. They say this is what really got me, is because the pet's like trying to go with him on the journey, and he turns around and he goes, "Hey, you can't come with me. You're too fat and too old to make it." Like, my cat is 17 years old and really fat and old. Aww. And also has missing front teeth, kind of like this creature. I was like, this is my cat. This is so crazy. And she's huge and fat and old. And so like the fact that like this animal dies at the end, they're also like, it is like actually sort of measured. Like, it's not tragic. This is like a very old animal. Clearly it was like his father's pet as well. Mm-hmm. And, like, it's just time, it's like the right time. And they say like, we can keep him alive, but it's not going to be pleasant, or we can just like let him go with dignity. And they're like, yeah, let's do that. And like, that's like quite realistic of like how it usually how it often happens. And so I was like, shit, wow. They really, they knew what they were doing with this.
Yeah. I think good on them for like actually going there and sticking with it. I think they wanted to make changes or something, but I think they kind of kept kind of the heart of what she was trying to do with the story. So yeah. And we also get to see some of Spock's like general childhood. He's getting bullied, and more interaction between him and Sarek, and it's Amanda too as well, but it's real, like, I feel like they really strike on with him and Sarek, and I like seeing the little Vulcan kids bullying him. It's so
I know. I like when they bully him.
The seeing like the other kids as well as Spock, kind of it shows that this logic thing isn't innate. Like,
yes,
it's something they have to figure out. Like, they are, it's not that they're not emotional. They are very emotional, and like so much so that it can be overpowering, and they have to they learn to bring it in.
I mean, they got a shit ton of rituals.
Yeah.
We do too. Like, that we have to deal with all aspects of being alive. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a really good point, McKenna. It's a really very good point. Like, I hadn't quite thought of that. It was overshadowed by the fact that the big cat dies at the end, but very good point about the Vulcans being like hyper emotional and having to like learn that. They're very complicated. I'm sure people have written like PhD theses, maybe not PhD, but master's thesis.
No, some dork has.
This. It's interesting.
It's something, we talked about it, like the contradictions with human. Like, it touches back on us, like it is sort of a metaphor to us, but we talked about it with like the Klingons, how they have, I think that's another way they represent aspects of humanity, of like, we have these ideas of what we think is honorable and right, but they can be subverted for political gain or personal gain or whatever. And you can kind of see like how it's not just this perfect thing that's like implanted in them. And so, yeah, I think that's a great point.
Yeah.
I also, I just like the look of when in all these animated episodes, when they go down to a planet and you just see how it's drawn and like stuff, it looks so awesome. So seeing Vulcan in that style was really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I really like obviously it's so suited to being animated, but, it'd be so, I know that there's Lower Decks, which is an animated, like, kids Star Trek, right?
No, what's it called? What's the Nickelodeon one called? Prodigy.
Yeah.
Prodigy.
Prodigy.
Lower Decks is more like, it looks sort of like Rick and Morty, I guess, but it's like, it's adult. It's like an adult swim type thing. That's actually in these shows, in both of these animated shows, they've brought back races that you only ever really saw in the animated series, which is cool.
That's cool.
Because they're like, it's easy. We don't have to like build a crazy bird costume or whatever,
Right.
We can just
it's just cool. I like this. Like I hadn't. I mean, part of what I love about Star Trek, obviously, is that it's like got all these crazy sets and costumes, and like it's just very human, which I just love. But there's something also very charming about the animated series, and I had never seen anything that was animated Star Trek, so I'm really glad you included that. And I just am a sucker for the storyline of like having to time travel back and like be the person that you remember as somebody else. Like that's just cool. Like I just like that. I'm a sucker for that. Every time that's an element in a story, I'm into it. So I liked that.
What about traveling back in time to be the person you wish you were at the time? You know what I'm talking about. Tapestry. Picard Tapestry.
Oh.
Play Damjat, Starfleet. You'll know someday.
I was like, I hope Goo's not asking me if I know what that is.
No, I was just, that's another thing. They just, that will be there's a lot of time travel, which is funny. Sometimes it's like time travel is so hard to do, and then other times they'll do something like this. Or like in Star Trek 4, they're just like, we just fly around the sun really fast and it'll set us back. I love it.
No, I love when time travel doesn't have to be like so fucking granular, and like so often it's like, okay, well we have to be blah blah blah. Like this is just like Spock's like, oh shit, that was me. I never had a crazy cousin. I did that shit. Now I gotta do that. And like he's not fucked up about it. He's not like I have to do it exactly the right way. He's just like, whatever, man. Gotta go back. And he made it different. He did something different. I was a bit unclear about what that was, but he did something different.
I don't even remember.
He said. He was like, except I don't remember what it was, but he did mention it.
Was
and I was
there like some old ass Vulcan wizard in here or something? I don't remember.
Like a doctor.
Oh.
There was a doctor.
Forgot about that guy.
Because they tried to save the
Ichaya. The Celet?
Oh, yeah.
Is that its name? Celet? Is it?
No.
Ichaya.
What's the Ichaya?
Mm-hmm.
It's a good name.
It's a good name.
Well, there's a part when the little kid goes back and he goes, please help me. And then the doctor's like, I'm sorry, but you are known for doing what humans call practical jokes.
Yeah.
He like almost doesn't go with him. And I was like, wait, what? That must come back at another point. But he's like, that was one time.
Now we need an episode about that.
I know. More Spock lore.
He probably does get a lot of shit like, here's that fucking human kid,
I know. I like that they don't lean too heavily on that, but that because for Worf, I mean, maybe it's just the episodes you chose, but the Worf episodes are really like that's a big part of his whole shit.
Oh yeah, no, it gets worse for him.
Yeah,
as the discommendation, that's a big sore spot. So
yeah.
You'll see.
Yeah, I can tell that's not gonna go well.
Actually, I had something. I had something sort of related to that in an upcoming episode, but it might be pushed back now. If we got to do some. I think Prime Directive seems like a fun topic. But sorry, anything else about this episode?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention the like when Spock is saying bye to Sarek.
What's he say? I don't remember.
I don't remember exactly what he says, but Sarek kind of thanks him for helping out Spock, his son.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Oh, you're welcome back here, or whatever." And it's kind of like, oh, they really feel like
it's where he made sort of peace with his dad, but not really.
Yeah, it's like both like the first and last step in a way.
Yeah, which I don't know.
I don't know if last, but
well, it's some rocky steps that are there. I don't know where they get to by the end of this, but
yeesh. Yeah. It is weird to think of that part. I also was like, man, to like go back and like talk to your parents when they were like your age. You're at the same age now that you go back to it. I don't know.
They're like a fucking 100-something years old or whatever. Like, so it's hard. I don't understand how old they're all supposed to be.
Right. Yeah. But I like this episode a lot though.
Yeah.
This was a tight episode, and I kind of want to watch more of the animated series if they happen to fit into what we're talking about. They probably don't, but I'm interested in the animated series.
Let's wrap it up for now. We got it. At least right now we're under 2 hours, which I'm pretty impressed with. But
I know we gotta get out in the next few minutes so that we can stay under 2 hours.
So I want to do. I mean, I do want to do. I had stuff set up for Romulan stuff, but now I kind of want to do. Can we do Prime Directive stuff? Yeah, it don't matter. Okay.
Yeah, whatever you got.
We'll do that, but first, so we're gonna be moving this summer, and so we need to kind of give ourselves some breaks. So I thought one thing we could do. I'm kind of calling my shot for my next movies that whip, but maybe the next time we talk about Star Trek, maybe we do a movies that whip that we can then put on our feed at a later date. Sweet. And I'm thinking we just watch Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan.
And that's the one that I've heard about a lot. That name is like always sort of loomed large as like that's the one that people know about. Yes. At least in my memory. So that would be sick. And yes, and I just am so stoked that I feel like the luckiest gal in Star Trek land, because I get to have somebody I get to talk about Star Trek and I get to experience it in a really fun way that is not, people don't normally get such a tailored experience. So I'm always so happy to do these episodes. They're a ton of fun, and thank you both. I appreciate it.
I'll also say we'll watch an original series episode, Space Seed, where they introduce the character of Khan.
Oh, sweet. Yes.
And so
give me some extra stuff to watch before the movie. That would be sweet.
Well, so slight spoilers for just like discussion topics, but you kind of hinted at it about like going back, like leaving something and not coming back, or like letting it be, or just they don't follow up on things often. So this is going to be interesting because it's like an episode where they ended a certain way, and then for a movie they were like, okay, but what happened after that? And
cool.
And it seems like that too convoluted, but no, they made what most people consider the greatest Star Trek movie out of it. So, and I mean, I think it's a great movie. It's the motion picture. It actually has a lot of common actually with Balance of Terror too, as well, in terms of vibes. So we're gonna get a big submarine space battle epic movie, and then after that we'll figure out our next proper television. We'll maybe go find out what the Prime Directive's all about and what we think of it, how Picard handled it. It's gonna be how Picard dealt with the Prime Directive. So we're laying it, and then we're gonna get back into Romulans and Romulans.
Nice.
So yeah.
My real boyfriend Picard. It's been too long since we've checked in on him. So
all right. Well, we're still under 2 hours, so I think I should end the episode like right now, basically. So thanks for everyone for listening, and we'll see you later. Goodbye.
Bye.
As always, we want to give a special shout out to our Millennium Star tier patrons. Thank you, Cyberlink420, Darren Hupke, Infection Form, Jeremy Aber, Kiefer, Nico Sylvian, Paul Quaid, and Underline V. Thank you for your support, and for more information on how to support us, you can go to patreon.com/flashback64.